All right. So with Pinpoint, we started looking at communication data across our customer base, and we've communicated with about 800,000 different appointments, and we expected to see kind of typical operations data, looking at what the different top shops are, top shops, how they are going to have a better messaging or sharper timing windows and more automation. And all that's true. Um, but the most interesting finding wasn't really about the messages that they're sending out at all. It was something a little bit more fundamental. And when we looked at it, a lot of the other metrics that we see made a lot more sense. So I just want to walk you through a little bit what we found and kind of what this might mean for your shop. So just to give a little bit more additional context, I'm Jonathan. I work with Pinpoint Status, and we work with countertop installation companies across the states. We really help them with their communication. So a lot of this is automated text messages. So this shows up as reminders or confirmation messages as well as follow-up. So that's kind of what we do. And because we do work with these different companies all across the states, we have a unique vantage point because we get to see all of the communication patterns that happen kind of across the industry all at once. So the first thing that we found that was kind of surprising for us is that when we looked at the different messages that are being sent out, only about 1 in 4 companies is actively talking to their customers, asking for them to confirm appointments. So 3/4 of the industry aren't really even doing that with the customer at all, from the point of view of the messaging that goes out. And we expected that to be higher, and so we're a little bit surprised by that. But with that, what we found is that among the shops that do ask for confirmation, about 1 in 5 customers respond. But we also saw a large amount of discrepancy there as well. Some of the best run shops were actually getting closer to 50%. And unsurprisingly, the shops that don't ask for confirmations, they get pretty much about 0. Ironically, it's kind of interesting though that even companies that don't ask for confirmations do sometimes get confirmations. So that's actually interesting that it's not actually 0. So the obvious reaction to this is that it probably makes a lot of sense to set up the confirmation messages, and that's certainly true. But that's actually not the part that I found interesting once we started getting this information and working through it. So what's actually interesting is what happens next, and what happens with some of the different messages that go out. So it turns out that the confirmation messages are just kind of the tip of something that's a little bit, quite a bit bigger. So we expected that a lot of the confirmation behavior to correlate with all sorts of other things. So how often the job site isn't ready, schedule workloads issues, other day of issues. So the homeowner not being available on the day of, for example. But the biggest thing that we actually found that there's a very strong correlation is with rescheduling lead time. So with shops that ask for confirmation, they see about 1/3 less short-term reschedulings. So this is things where a person gets a message a day of, says, hey, we're going to be coming, and they say, actually, I have to cancel. So this is ones where you have less than 24 hours notice. This is actually something that ends up being quite a big hassle, because if there's an appointment that needs to be rescheduled a week in advance, that's usually not too big of a deal. But when you have something where you have 6 hours notice, you're now juggling a lot of things to try and make that happen. So with this, what we found is that these customers, they were rescheduling earlier, even though we're being explicitly asked to. And that's interesting, because that means that shops that ask customers to confirm aren't necessarily asking to reschedule. They're not nagging customers. They're not sending out additional reminders, but their customers are still rescheduling earlier anyways. the customer is choosing to give the shop more notice, even though the shop didn't explicitly go out of the way to ask them to do that. So what the data is telling us is that the top performing shops aren't necessarily top performing because they have better messages. They're winning because they've made a decision, um, sometimes quietly, sometimes without necessarily being explicit. But they're making the decision that the customer is a participant in the install, not just the recipient of the install. So the days between being sold and the installation date aren't just a quiet period where nothing happens. They're really an opportunity for a relationship to be built between the customer.
That's true. Yeah.
Sorry, is that something?
You're good. Keep going.
Okay, so this means that the time between being sold and the installation happening, that's not a quiet period. It's an opportunity to build that relationship. So there's some behaviors and takeaways that you can take away from this. And really, it comes down to thinking about the customer and that being in that relationship with them. So when we look at this, we are looking at messages that really invite a response from the customer. So these are not just notifications. We want to do things that actually have the customer get engaged. So they're really kind of that invite to be in that relationship. There's other things like making sure that arrival windows are given, not just dates. And this just shows respect for the customer, and that's something that they appreciate as well. So this really is a customer focused way of approaching things. We can also see a lot of things that help you and the customer have a better outcome on the day of. So this is sending what to expect type messages beforehand. So these are things where you can let the customer know what your expectations are. So this could be things like having sinks disconnected and counters cleared off, but also making sure that they know what they can be expecting on their side. So if there's things that they need to have ready, they can make sure that that's happening as well. And even just timelines. That way they know what they should be expecting on their side. And this is also things like doing the follow-up after the install. This helps drive reviews, which is great, but it also helps just kind of cement in place the relationship and make sure that that goes well. So with when you take this customer-centric approach, you can really see the difference in the messages that are sent. Some of them are written to be inviting a response. So this would be something as simple as saying reply C to confirm or call us to reschedule. With that, you're actually inviting the customer to come along with you and work with you. We've seen some messages where they literally say, do not reply to this text, which that's very explicitly excluding them from that relationship. So with the same software, the same features, we have very different stances towards the customer and experiences that the customers are going to be receiving. And none of what I've said before is really about the software. This can be done whether you're manually sending a text message or whether you're using something like Pinpoint. They're really about the decisions that your shop has made, whether it's been explicit or implicit, about what kind of operations you want to have. Tools like Pinpoint exist because once you decide you're going to talk with your customer, doing it manually can have lots of scaling problems. But the tool is really downstream of that decision. The decision is what matters. So if you make this decision to be more communication oriented and more open with the customer, how does this benefit your shop? So let's run through a couple of quick examples. So we look at day of disruptions. So this would be something like where the customer isn't available at the time, and you don't have the communications, that's not clearly expressed. So these type of day of disruptions can be really detrimental. When we look at some of the data, we're seeing ranges for different companies from 1% to 17% have appointments with day of disruptions. When you think about what this costs you, once you add up needing to take a trip a second time, put aside cruise idle time, rescheduling, and that scramble. You might be looking at $500 if this is happening a few times a week. That ends up being $75,000 a year, which is real money. It adds up quickly, and that's at the $500 cost. If it's higher than that, if it's $800 or $1,000, it's that much more. So this is one place where not having that clear the communication can cause a problem, especially when you're looking at things like the yeah, not to just have that clear communication and not knowing when things need to be rescheduled in this case. And this isn't just about disrupted days. The shops that don't have customer engagement on the front end are usually the same shops with a scheduler who's burning 10 or 15 hours a week on the phone, manually chasing customers. Now, this is paying an employee to do work that the customer would happily do themselves if they had that channel open to do things like requesting to be rescheduled or confirming that they are still available for the appointment. And this really is where Pinpoint status shines. We help automate and standardize your customer communication so that the normal day-to-day tasks are handled for you automatically and reliably. This means that you can focus on your business and your customers' unique individual needs instead of all of the ones that are kind of standardized. So kind of the big takeaway that I want to leave you with is kind of asking two questions as you leave this meeting. The first one's easy. Do you actually ask your customers to confirm appointments before the day of? And this is not just a reminder, but you actually ask the question to them and you want them to give you that response. Most shops are not doing that. So this is one of the simplest low effort things that you can change that will help all of your metrics. And the second one's a little bit harder. In the days between when you sell a job and when it is installed, how many touch points does your customer have with your shop? So this is, again, not how many messages you send out, but how many are inviting the customer to respond and have that communication. The answer is 0 or 1. You're operating in more of a notification mode where you're just letting them know that it's happening. You're not operating in a relationship mode where you're having that opportunity for the back and forth communication. When you do this, it improves a lot of your metrics across the board. So it's going to reduce the amount of no-shows that you have or the lateness of rescheduling and a lot of those other components that are nuisances and things that you want to be able to reduce and address. So the countertop shops that are going to win in the next 5 years aren't the ones that have the best equipment or even the best installers necessarily. They're certainly important, but they're going to be the shops that are deciding that the days between sold and the install are an opportunity for building a relationship. It's not really an afterthought. So once you make that decision, then a lot of your operational stuff gets easier. The customer's experience gets better and the numbers start moving in the direction that lets you grow better and start moving in that right direction. So that's really the core of it. I just want to say thanks to ActionFlow for hosting, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I'm monitoring the chat. If there's any questions.
Hey guys, this is Dave Moore from the Pinpoint sales team, and I just wasn't sure if you guys understood kind of like how like it's integrated into your system. So when you put an appointment in to ActionFlow, it gets pushed to Pinpoint, so there's not a dual entry there, and those messages go out automatically, however often, the frequency and the style that you want. And then I think another great benefit is there's a bio of who's coming to the door. So the homeowner is like, oh, hey, this is so and so, and these are their interests, and they can also leave a review that goes back to the owner. as well as it helps with the posting of like Yelp and Google reviews, which in my opinion is one of the big benefits of Pinpoint. Instead of just pushing it right out there, if you have a low review, it kind of delays the posting of the review and gives the service tech time to correct the problem to hopefully get like a 4 or a 5 review. And it's also great for reducing the impact to the dispatcher, a lot less calls, and frees up their time to do maybe something a little different. It also allows kind of benchmarking between the crews to see, you can create a little competition between them if you want, more of a gamification. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And you get just a lot better view of the data and what your team is doing and how your customers are reacting. So hope I wasn't redundant on that, but I just want to make sure you guys understood there's quite a lot to it.
This is Roderick with Fabricator's Choice. Just want to bring some clarity. Quite often there's a confusion between the texting feature within ActionFlow, which is requires a Twilio subscription, and Pinpoint. They are not one of the same. Yes, they have some similar features in that they both can communicate with the client via text, but they are definitely two separate products. Pinpoint is very much, as I kind of align it with, you got a dental appointment and you get a reminder. And then you also have the pizza delivery guy that sends you a reminder, he's on his way, so you as the client have visibility of who's coming to your door as far as delivering your pizza, in this case, delivering your countertops. So I just want to bring that clarity to it, that this is not the same functionality as text messaging within ActionFlow as part of the Twilio integration, but a totally separate product, and they should not be intermixed as far as their functionality goes.
Mm-hmm. What is
Thanks
the
for that,
cost
Robert.
associated with this?
Yeah, so Pinpoint has the initial onboarding where we do the whole setup, and that's $597. But then you're looking at, and that's just a one-time cost, and then you're looking at $22 per field crew per month.
Yep, no contract, cancel anytime. And the other thing that I really like about Pinpoint, the installers, I think, appreciate it, because as soon as they're done with one project and they're heading to the next, they just open the app and hit play on the app and it does the rest. So they don't need to pick up the phone or send a text. And so once they get used to it, they're like, oh gosh, this is so much more convenient than having to do much, more effort for communication.
So is that inside the ActionFlow app, or is there going to be a separate app for that?
This is a separate app.
Okay.
Yeah, and the meetings get still schedule your meetings and everything in ActionFlow, but then that populates your Pinpoint app in there. So get all your job information in the ActionFlow app, communication with the client. The client happens through the Pinpoint app. I was just wondering if you could go over the Google review mitigation just a little bit more on I think that's like a huge piece of Pinpoint's value is, one, getting those reviews brought in, but also giving you the chance to address, can you kind of describe what that process looks like a bit more?
Yeah, so in the happy case, you have a service technician, they do the job, and everything goes well. They ask for, when they're done the job, they hit the button that asks for a review, and the customer says 5-star. Everything gets submitted to the Pinpoint side of things, and we typically would follow up saying, hey, can you leave a review on Google? That's the happy situation. If you have a different situation where the service tech Jonathan walks through the house, he's got muddy shoes, he grinds into the carpet, and the customer gives a 1-star review. We, with Google's rules, we're actually not allowed to not ask for a rating. So that has to happen. If you're asking anyone for a rating, you have to ask everyone for a rating. But what we do is that we will, when that 1-star review comes in, we're going to notify somebody on your team. That way you know about this right away. Additionally, we're not going to immediately ask for a Google review. We give you a couple days to try and rectify the issue. That way we can try and avoid having those 1-star reviews come through. That way you have an opportunity to address it appropriately.
Great. Dan, did you have another question?
Yeah, going back to the app question. So the guys will be toggling between the two apps on their phone, ActionFlow and the Pinpoint?
Yes, yeah. So as they're, before they arrive, they're probably on the Pinpoint app communicating with the customer. And then when they arrive on site, that's when they're on the ActionFlow app.
The way
Okay.
we usually talk about it is we talk about ActionFlow is your project management side of things. You're going to be, when you're working on the project, you'll be in the ActionFlow app. When you're between your appointments and you're communicating with the customer, that's where you're going to have the Pinpoint app. Additionally, the Pinpoint app, we very, very, very strongly believe in keeping that very simple. Almost always what's going to happen is the service tech will pull up the app, they'll tap on the appointment and tap the play button, and then they'll press the stop button when they're done. Almost always that's what they're doing. The only time that we really run into a situation where they're doing more than that is if they're wanting to use some of the other features, like if they're running late, they can communicate with the customer that way. But the vast majority of the time they're hitting start, stop, then go to the next appointment, start, stop. So we would really want to keep that simple. Their job is to do their job, not to play with our app.
So when you're doing it from inside ActionFlow, when you are initially scheduling, that will be tied in, integrated into ActionFlow on our desktop. We can do it from our desktop, send our text to the customer, confirm whatever, or your reminder, whatever. So that's all within ActionFlow though, correct?
Right. So if your current workflow is to continue to send like a day before, send a message in ActionFlow and all of that, that stays the same. What happens is when you schedule that appointment in ActionFlow, it populates in Pinpoint. So it'll have the schedule, like it'll populate all the appointments for that day in Pinpoint for that person. So they're not messing around with that too much. I don't know if I did a great job explaining that. If anyone else wants to jump in.
Yeah, the intention is that for the office staff, you probably are not going to really need to change your workflows at all. You'll still schedule things in ActionFlow. We pull it over automatically. And part of that onboarding process is going through and saying what message or what appointments do we want to be sending messages to, and what do those look like. So if you want to send one message for templates, a different message for installs, we can do that. We could do it so that template appointments get messages 3 days ahead of time, and installs get it a week beforehand, 3 days beforehand, one day beforehand. So a lot of that will be configured in the system, and then that will kind of just run in the background. But then, yeah, your scheduling would stay automatic or within ActionFlow, and we just pull it over. And if you do messaging inside of ActionFlow, you can still do that. That doesn't reduce your ability in that way.
There's a question in the chat here from an individual here. It says, can you delegate which customers you want to do this with?
Yes, Eric.
We have a number of clients that would not really benefit from this feature, and they wouldn't want it. So how do we manage that?
She has a note that he wanted to see.
So this is actually one of the really big benefits of Pinpoint, because our focus is entirely on that. Sorry, actually. So because our focus is entirely on the communications, we have a lot of options around that. So there's things where we can only send to certain types of appointments. We can exclude customers and even different accounts. There's a bunch of options with that. We can make it so that only appointments for the service provider, Bob, receive messages, and we don't send anything to any of Gary's appointments. So there's a lot of options to do a bunch of different things there. We also can do message bundling. So if you have 5 appointments with one builder, instead of getting 5 separate text messages on separate threads where it says, hey, we're doing this at this address, another text message with that type of information, we can actually bundle those messages up so that they receive one message that says, hey, you've got appointments today. You've got appointment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they receive that as kind of a bundled up message as well. So depending on what you're looking to do, we've got a lot of different options about how exactly that's going to be presented to the customer. Anywhere from giving them a full blast and letting them hit all 5 notifications, or restricting them so they get no notifications. But we have a lot of options around there.